some struggle to adapt to civilian life, especially if they've been in the military for quite some time, and also if they've been frontline.
Welcome to the Bailiwick Express podcast. My name is Matthew Leach. I'll be joined each week by a guest for a series of podcasts. Each will shine a light on topics from across the bailiwick. The format will change week to week. We'll have debates, reviews, hot seat interviews and special guests. So stick with us as we offer some insight on some of the most important issues we in the bailiwick face. Ex-service personnel can experience anxiety, depression or addictive behaviour much like the rest of us. However, their experiences in the armed forces mean their mental health issues can be more specific and require support from people who truly understand what it means to come home a veteran. The Royal British Legion has been supporting ex-service personnel emotionally and financially for decades, and the Guernsey branch has recently launched a mental health support service for people in the island. I spoke to the chair of the welfare team, Marlene Place, and the chair of the Central RBL committee, Rowe, about the service and why it's been launched.
So it's a new initiative, hot off the press, and Royal British Legion Guernsey are offering to fund 4 sessions with an appointed psychologist for any ex-service personnel on the island.
Okay, and so how did this service come about? Where did the idea about this come? Why did it come to fruition?
In the summer we did a pilot study. It was done by Rowe, who was a student at Bournemouth University, and she did a pilot study for us to look at the needs of ex-service personnel returning to the island.
The survey was launched in July last year and led by a student, Rowe, who Marlene referred to. It was launched to find any gaps in the provision and support that veterans receive in the island. I spoke to Ariane to find out why she got involved and what she found out. I tried the number that Marlene gave me, and I tried the number that you gave me, but obviously something weird's going on.
Yeah, I think it's because it's a UK number and it sometimes just goes really funny.
Oh yeah. Well, it's okay now. We've got through to each other, so that's okay.
Yeah.
Just first off, could I get your name and who you are?
So I'm Ariane Rowe. I am a Bournemouth University student. I do psychology with forensic investigation.
That's fascinating. That's great. That's a great course to do. So tell me, how did you get involved with Marlene and the RBL?
So it started with me looking for a summer placement between my second year and third year of uni. And I'd been looking around, and with COVID and everything, I hadn't had much luck. And then a psychologist I had been in contact with said, I have this opportunity where you can run some interviews for the RBL to kind of do this pilot study. And I thought, well, yeah, that's a brilliant opportunity, so I took it on.
That sounds right up your street. So what exactly what did they want you to do? What do they want you to find out?
So what they wanted me to do was conduct interviews with ex-service personnel who had come back to the island after their service, and to see whether there were things to support on the island and whether there was more that could be done to help their transition back to the island, or anything they thought was good or improvements. So really their opinion on what can be done to help.
And how did you undertake the project?
So what we did was I met with Marlene, and at first I actually went to one of the Royal British Legion breakfasts.
The banter,
which I believe
banter
happened.
breakfast.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I met with some of the people who I was interviewing there, and then we just went from there and formed the questions and specifically what Marlene wanted to know, and just went from there.
And so what kind of questions were you asking, and what kind of results did you get? So we were asking quite broad questions because we wanted to hear their personal experiences. So really we had some sections. So
For example, we asked about employment or housing and mental health, just to gauge what areas they believe that they had support in and which ones they were lacking.
Okay, and so we are speaking this week about the initiative to offer 4 sessions with a psychologist in Guernsey.
Yeah.
So did your survey find that there wasn't perhaps the provision in the island for mental health for ex-service personnel?
Yes, that was one of the big points, actually. So when the service personnel came out of wherever they were, Army, Navy, the UK has a lot of organisations in place. However, coming to the island, it seemed that they found they almost cut off from these. And while there are things in place on the island, specific psychologists for ex-military personnel were lacking. So having this in place will definitely help, I think.
And how many people did you speak to?
We spoke to 17 males.
And was there anything else within your survey that you found to be surprising or interesting or noteworthy?
All of it was actually really interesting, and there were some things that you wouldn't expect. For example, with employment, people not quite understanding what an ex-military personnel brings to the table, or housing, for example. Some people struggled getting housing because they couldn't show they've been a tenant before because they've been living in army barracks. So there are things that to a usual citizen you wouldn't imagine they would have trouble with, but they do.
And from that, we found that there was a need for mental health services. We are not an emergency service, really not an emergency service, but we are going to be there if individuals would like to talk to a psychologist. We will be the first point of contact for the individual, but then we would pass all the information on to the psychologist, and all communication will then be between the individual and the psychologist, so we actually step out of the loop.
So it keeps it professional then, between the person who wants to speak to a professional and what the things they want to discuss.
And confidential,
Yeah.
Which in Guernsey is a really important factor.
And so you're fully supportive of this? Is this something you think is worthwhile in the island?
I think it's fantastic. Mental health is a massive thing at the moment. Afghanistan and the withdrawal from Afghanistan has caused a lot of anguish with a lot of service personnel. Suicide rates, depression, everything is hit an all-time high, I think. In fact, I read some stats not long ago that suicide rates, etc., are higher than they were in the 80s or something, and there's like a third of the service, there's a third of the army strength now. So to hit the same numbers is horrendous. If you look at the number of service personnel we've still got serving. As an ex-squaddy, being able to speak to people who are of a similar mindset, the psychologist that Marlene's got in place is trained to work with military personnel, because they are different. Squaddies are different beasts. They're trained to do different things. They're trained to experience and etc. So having a military psychologist, it makes the difference. There's an understanding when you walk in there, rather than trying to explain it to somebody who has no clue, which is nice not to have a clue. But
I can imagine. I mean, is the community quite large over here, ex-service personnel?
Well, Marlene has she's set up so many things in respect to this.
Yeah.
Marlene has set up the thing called the Banter Breakfast, which is a breakfast attended by ex-service personnel and their families. It takes place once a month. How many visits that, Marlene? 70 a week or something?
Yes, 70 a month, yeah.
70 a month, sorry, 70 per session. But how would you estimate? You know better than I do.
Interestingly, we don't know.
We're not allowed to know. Data protection.
Yeah, fair enough.
There's a guesstimate.
So there's got to be a fairly substantial community in the island.
If we use the UK statistics, then there are probably around 2,000. But we think there are more in Guernsey because there are a lot more people who have gone, who have a certain affinity really with the armed forces.
Yes, okay,
So
I can
I think
understand
that's
that.
probably more than that.
Well, I did 8 years short service as a nursing sister in the Princess Mary's Royal Air Force Nursing Service during the 80s. That was when the Falklands War was on. Though I wasn't involved during the conflict, after the conflict, I was involved with Aeromed and things like that, which is evacuating casualties back to UK from wherever they happen to be. So I did actually get down to the Falklands after the conflict and see it.
That was Heather Chan, who is the branch welfare officer for the Royal Air Forces Association Guernsey branch. She has welcomed the support being given by the Royal British Legion.
I've been nursing ever since I left the Air Force, and while I've been here in Guernsey, back here in Guernsey, I have been also the Royal Air Force Association's welfare officer, so I sort of helped out with any local RAF people that needed any support or anything like that. Yeah.
When did you first come across the Royal British Legion then? How does that tie in? Is that...
Well, I've always known about the RBL. My dad was in the Royal British Legion. He was in the Navy during the end of the war. And so I knew about it because Dad was quite a... he took part in quite a lot of the stuff, including, the Remembrance Sunday parades and things like that. So, but as I said, after coming out of the Air Force myself, I sort of, when I moved here, that is, I sort of knew they existed. But as I said, being Air Force, I helped out with the Royal Air Force Association and welfare there. I'm very interested in supporting the RBL and everything, mainly because my son is now in the army. So you never know, in the future he may need some support and everything. But it's a very good service in supporting ex-service people and their families. So just like the Royal Air Force Association does as well.
And so I'm assuming then you clearly support this new initiative they're going for, these 4 sessions with an appointed psychologist for people who may need it.
Yes, definitely. The veterans that come out, those, sort of ones that come out of the service, a lot of people struggle, not everybody, but some struggle to adapt to civilian life, especially if they've been in the military for quite some time. And also if they've been frontline and seen anything that's, normal civilians wouldn't see. Especially conflict areas and things like that. And often or not, ex-servicemen maybe struggle to actually talk about it because they feel that nobody would understand it because they haven't experienced it. So they can get into trouble with their mental health, or not even actually sort of serious mental health, but they may be anxious or become depressed or anything like that because they're struggling with what's going on in their minds. And so to be able to offer something where they can have at least somebody to talk to sort of waylay their fears that there's something more serious going on, mental health-wise, or just all guiding them into the right direction to get some support and help.
And so is there quite a large ex-service personnel community in Guernsey?
Yes, there is, and that's been shown because the RBL do what we call a banter breakfast, first Saturday of the month, and that has been so well attended. I hadn't realised how many ex-service personnel we had on the island, and also when we have parades like the Remembrance Sunday and things like that, there's a large section of vets that march with that now. So. We as an island here have supplied the military with a lot of personnel in various forms, in various careers and things, both all 3 services and Marines as well, So yes, there is a large contingent who have served and are serving with the British military at the moment. So yes, it's sorry.
No, that's okay. I didn't mean to cut you off there. I was just going to ask, you did mention before, it's important that there is, help and people there for people to talk to if they need it. What support is there currently in the island? Is this something filling a void, or is it something that's building on what's already established here?
It's building on what's established. The RBL already do a fairly good welfare support, but when it comes to the mental health, that is a gap. There is a gap, and I think sometimes the ex-service personnel struggle to actually access any mental health service. So this would be filling a gap, and it would be a step towards getting more in-depth support if they need it. But this would be it's a service that's not an emergency service, but it's somebody to talk to, so they can sort of assess as to what the problem is, as to whether it's a big problem, little problem. Just having somebody to talk to, I think, sometimes is the key thing, and starting on talking about it if something's been, bothering them.
And in your ex-service history, I suppose this is something you've come across quite a lot.
Not a huge amount in my field, but I do know it exists, and I've through working with the welfare system within veterans, with veterans, you hear a lot about it, about especially PTSD of those that have been on the front line in Afghanistan and things like places like that. It's because as I said, when they're in the military, they can talk about it because they're with people that have experienced the same things. And when they come out, they struggle with that because people don't either understand what they're going through and why they are struggling, or don't understand what they're talking about when they if they start talking about it.
We're talking about filling a space, I suppose. I mean, is there a provision at the moment, well, beyond the service that you're offering these 4 sessions? I mean, what is in place for ex-service personnel in Guernsey right now?
Rowe Legion Guernsey again brought over somebody from Combat Stress in the UK. This was a couple of years ago. And they linked in with some of the local ex-service personnel, and there is now in operation a peer support group. So it's a combat stress peer support group. Ben can tell you more about that.
Yeah, it's just a service. It's run by veterans for veterans. So the chap who runs it, a fellow called Neil Tiers. Neil is ex-Royal Marine. He's been trained. He's not a psychologist, but he's been trained as, what terminology is it?
Peer support leader.
A peer support leader. So yeah, he will sit there. He will run the meeting, and it's just a chance for people to offload their issues onto people who will understand them a little bit better. And then they can be pointed in directions. They can just be supported. It's just to show there is a network out there. You don't have to suffer on your own. You can put your hand up and say, I need some help, or you can just turn up and take the mickey out of one another, which is what most of the sessions turn out to be. But it's like-minded people getting around together to say, I've got an issue with this, and then somebody might have an answer or a solution, or it might just be a case of thrashing out there and then on the night. It's just good. It's mates, in effect, who probably don't know each other very well, but can talk to each other, and there is an understanding and acceptance, which is great.
I suppose it's a specific type of camaraderie that other people may not kind of understand.
Yeah. Yeah, the subjects, the banter is, you wouldn't want to probably sit around in a pub and do it because it'd upset people potentially, but you can do it in a safe environment where you can say whatever you want, and it'll be accepted on face value. And as I say, it's a thrashing ground where you can thrash things out and it can be resolved. Sometimes it's as simple as that.
And so if you're hoping that people come forward to, if they need help and they want to, what kind of issues might somebody be facing who might want to come forward and take advantage of this initiative?
I understand more about depression and anxiety in the last couple of years than I have done for the rest of my life, because it is out there and people are taking notice now. It is real. PTSD is very real, and of course what the lads and lasses have witnessed can have an effect on them for the rest of their lives. So there's more and more coming out of the forces, and somebody needs to pick up the pieces, and we have Marlene and her team and welfare.
Big thank you to Marlene.
Oh, hugely.
Yeah, it's a thank you to the team, really, not just to me. something it's just gone out of my head, but there was something else.
That's okay.
Oh yes, we brought over, again, Royal British Legion Guernsey, brought over teams to run mental health first aid for armed forces, specifically for armed forces.
Okay.
So we've trained in the region of 20 people to recognise these and to support in the early stages. One of the things that has been found is that the earlier an individual has treatment or has support, the better it is for them.
What is mental health first aid? Is that
the same as first aid, physical first aid. Okay. It's identifying the signs that someone is struggling and being able to provide the appropriate initial support, just initial support, because you can then signpost to more professional organisations, but it's identifying initially.
Again.
Yes. Earlier, again, a couple of years before COVID, a doctor from each surgery, and in fact 4 GPs, went across to the UK, to King's College, to the symposium conference that was going on about military mental health. So there is an individual in each of the practices who has a particular interest in working with armed forces personnel.
That's amazing.
It's greater knowledge as well, isn't it?
Yes. Is it new? It's not new, it's been going on for a long time, but I think it's more open, talked about, isn't it?
More accepted. There's less of the stiff upper lip, there's less of the stigma. People will discuss it now, whereas in the past they wouldn't, especially squaddies. Nothing wrong with me, I'm fine, and then take it home. But now that there's more of a willingness to engage with other people, which there never was. I mean, I've been out the army for a long time now, but back in my day, you wouldn't have done this, not in a million years. You'd have sat and had a beer and then had a punch-up probably. So things have moved on massively, and it is fantastic to see.
The service started on the 10th of January, and if you think you can use it or you'd like more information, you can phone 07781 131 389 between 7:30am and 7:30pm. And it's important to once again be reminded that the RBL Psychology Support Service is not an emergency service. Thank you for listening to the Bailiwick Express podcast. The title track was Shift My Weight by Luno. If you enjoyed it, I know it's a pain, but please like and share. It all helps, and remember, you can hit bailiwickexpress.com to stay right up to date with whatever is happening in the Bailiwick. You can find us online, on social, on email, and on internet radio. There'll be more from me, Matthew Leach, and all the Bailiwick Express team next Friday.